In this video, we are going to look at pelvic tilt, in particular anterior pelvic tilt. This is becoming quite a common thing in a lot of people. You might not necessarily know you have it, but it could be causing problems elsewhere. So things like hamstring tendinopathy or a lot of lower back pain is caused because of anterior pelvic tilt. We'll come on to what it is in a second. The reason that a lot of us have it now is due to sitting or long periods in that seated position. So whether that's driving or a desk job, certain muscles get tight and certain muscles get weak. And this is what causes our pelvis just to tilt forward slightly, creates excessive lordosis or the curvature of our lower back, and can cause pains anywhere in the body, but particularly around that hip area, so the back or the hip itself, or sometimes the hamstring. The test for this is called the Thomas test. We can perform this in a clinic. You can also self-test at home. So if you sit on the edge of a seat or the bed or something like that, and all you want to do is rock yourself back, lie down, and then bring one leg up and tuck it into your chest. What you're checking for here is what your flat leg is doing. So someone with anterior pelvic tilt, when they tuck that in, their leg will come up and off the couch. So if I was to do that naturally, mine comes up a little bit. And what you might see in someone with it bad is that it comes right up like that, or that they drop their hip out to try and keep it on the floor. And you can try that with both. So again, come back up in, and you can see there's just a little gap under my leg here, but you might find in someone with it quite bad that the leg comes right up or it drops down like that. That's called the Thomas test. We perform that in the clinic just to check if people have it, and that's what might be causing their injuries. The reason for this, I can show you by in a standing position. What happens here, so you have your greater trochanter and the top of your ilium bone, which is your hip. So you can find those two on each side. They're little bony points that you can palpate. What happens with anterior pelvic tilt is that the pelvis just tilts forward like that. And there's a number of reasons for that happening. We can also have posterior pelvic tilt, where the pelvis tilts backwards as well. People with that tend to have what's called flat back posture, so you can see them walking and their back is quite flat. The reason that anterior pelvic tilt is quite common is mostly due to hip flexors getting short and quite tight, and then glutes and everything around the back is becoming quite weak and quite long. The abs also become weak and long as well. And that's why everything just tilts forward into that position. A lot of it is because we're in a seated position, so hips are in flexion, hip flexors obviously always working and getting tight. Glutes, they could become lazy and switch off or don't fire as well. And that is why we get that pelvic tilt, so it causes back problems and it can cause hamstring problems as well. This routine, we're going to try and counteract that, so we're trying to get us back into neutral pelvis. So again, when we're going from posterior and anterior pelvic tilt, and we want to find that neutral position. It's a nice strong position and it causes the body to function properly. To do that, we're going to focus on each area, so the superior, the inferior, anterior and posterior regions of our hips. So we're talking hip flexors, we're talking glutes, we're talking our core and our psoas muscle, and we're talking our rectus spinae group. So we're going to run through all of those in this routine. It's going to be mostly strength exercises, but also a little bit of stretch exercise as well. First one we're going to focus on is the glutes. They're the biggest ones, and they tend to be the ones that switch off first and cause the most problems. So to do this, all we're going to do is just start to activate them. So we don't want huge load going through them, we just want them to be able to switch on. So to perform this to start with, we're just going to do humps and dumps or cat camel, whatever people want to call it. And this is just pelvic tilts and engaging all of those muscles that we just talked about. So as you work through this, you'll just feel each muscle working individually. So we're going to posteriorly rotate our pelvis, and then anteriorly tilt as well. So anterior there, and posterior there. Then we're trying to get a nice arch into our back that way, and then we're trying to arch up towards the roof or the ceiling that way. This is a nice exercise to do just because it trains our brain and our muscles how to function and how to tilt that pelvis on purpose. It's a nice way just to warm everything up around it as well. From there, we're going to find our neutral pelvis, so we want to go from full anterior to posterior, and then find that neutral pelvis somewhere in the middle, and then we want to try and lock our core into that position. So make sure your abs are nice and tight, your lower back and your hips aren't moving too much, and then we're just going to go into a donkey kick or leg extensions, and just raise up from there. Keeping the core tight, and we're trying to get a nice big squeeze from that glute as we go up. So as we go into that position and hold, we should feel the glute working. And we're going to repeat the same on the same side, on the other side. So again, nice and tight in the core. And feel that glute squeeze and work as we get to the top. You might find that you're able to squeeze one a little bit more than the other. A lot of people do have discrepancies in their left and right. So for me, my left doesn't fire quite as quickly. If you find that is the case for you, focus a little bit more on the side that you don't feel working as well. You might feel it working in your hamstring more than it is in the glute. Nice and slow movements, slow on the eccentric movement back down as well. Once we feel the glute is working nicely, so we're just getting a squeeze into it there and feeling it start to fatigue ever so slightly, we can move on to the next movement, which is going to be the same position. So from that neutral pelvis again, core nice and tight, and we're going to go straight out to the side this time to get that glute med to switch on as well, and the hip abductors. And repeat 3 to 5 on each side. If you feel, and it's probably going to be the same side, if you feel one side isn't quite firing as well, then keep working on that side and do a few extra reps. Should fatigue quite quickly in this position. We're just trying to fire everything up around that glute region. So we should now feel that our glutes are nice and switched on. So if you stand up or go into this kneeling position, you should be able to just tense each glute and feel it fire. So if you just pop your hands on your glute and then just squeeze, and you should feel it firm up. From here, we're going to go into a lunge position, and then we're going to start to work our hip flexors as well. So it's a nice stretch for the hip flexor, the left hip flexor, and we're getting a bit of a stretch into the right glute as well, and then we're just going to get them to fire from this position. So the first movement we're going to do, nice long lunge, so nice and extended with your hips, and you're just going to drop your body weight backwards, so your weight is more over your back leg as opposed to your front leg, and you're just going to push yourself up, but focus on pushing up with this leg. So we're not trying to lunge up from our front leg, we're bringing our body weight back, and then from there, we're just going to push up using mostly our left leg. You'll know that you're using your left leg more than your right, or your back leg more than your front leg, because you'll feel the fatigue and the contraction here in your hip flexors, as opposed to in your quad and your glute on the front leg. So make sure your body weight is nice and back, and then just pushing up. Nice little pause at the top just to show that you're balanced and working that muscle quite nicely. So you can see I'm a little bit unbalanced, but I'm using my hips to keep that focus, and I really feel it on this left leg at the top. We're just going to go again 3 to 5. First time you do this will probably feel quite difficult. It might feel like the muscle wants to cramp. It's just the brain getting used to that movement. So you might only be able to do 3 the first time you do it. Swap legs and then come back to it. The more you do this, the better you'll get. You'll be able to up your reps a little bit more. So same thing, nice long lunge, body weight backwards, and just push up on that back leg. Get a nice little stretch as you come down, and then you're asking that muscle to fire on the way up. So I'm a little bit stronger on this side, I'm a little bit more balanced. And back down. I'm going to do a few more on my left. So again, if you've got a weaker side, do a few more on your weak side. All we're trying to do here is correct imbalances. So if you feel something is less strong on one side, do more reps on that. You're trying to create a nice balanced pelvis, all the muscles working the same. So for me, my left side is worse, so I'm just going to do a few more here. Okay, and then come back down. The next movement is going to be the same position. All we're going to do is bring this lunge slightly closer together, so we're not quite as wide now, and then we're going to focus on using my front leg, so in this case now my right leg. So I'm going to be using my quads, and I'm also going to be using that glute. So the glute is on stretch, I'm in hip flexion, and I'm going to go into a slight bit of hip extension. So I'm asking that glute to work from its lengthened position. So body weight forward, knee is over my foot now, and I'm going to use the front leg to push me up, so effectively a lunge. And I can feel that's a completely different movement. So I'm not feeling it here as much. It's still working a little bit, but I'm starting to feel this on my front leg. So glute firing nicely, and a bit of the quad as well. Again, 3 to 5, you might find this a bit easier because it's a movement we do more often. Things like climbing the stairs is using this movement. And again, feel that glute firing. We've already fired the glute up, so it should be working now. So we start to get a bit of fatigue into it. Same thing, so knee is coming over that front foot. I'm just going to push up from there. Don't need to go all the way up. All I want to do is just get that muscle to fire from its shortened, or its lengthened position, sorry. And then if you want to focus on weak sides, do that again. So that's a good opportunity to do that. So I would focus on my left again there, because I could feel that wasn't quite as strong. We're staying in this same position. This is a really nice position for people who sit. So the half kneeling lunge is a nice stretch for it as well. So just pushing your body weight forward, feeling the stretch in that hip flexor. You can bring your hands up above your head as well. Here's a nice stretch for that. So in this same position, we're just going to combine those two movements. So I want my body weight in the middle, so my knee is just slightly back from my front foot, but not as much as it was from the initial movement. And then I'm just going to use both my back leg and my front leg to push me up. So I'm going to go straight up with my body in that position. And you should feel an even pull on your hip flexor here and your glute from there. Once you're good at this, you can then go to the point where you're not having to drop your knee down. So in effect, doing like a split lunge. And again, 3 to 5. You can go 5 to 8 if you become quite good at this. So once you've done this a few times, but again, focus on good quality reps as opposed to trying to pump out loads and loads. So body weight in the middle, knee slightly back, and then pushing up with both. This is a slightly stronger movement, so I'm a little bit more balanced here because I'm using both legs. And I'm going to go for one more here. And done. So I'm feeling a little bit of a burn around my hips. Nothing too drastic, so it's not an absolute killer session. It's just getting all those muscle imbalances to even out. We're then going to come into a bit of a stretch around the glute area. So to do this for the first movement, I'm going to have both legs down. Then I'm going to bring my right leg up and over the opposite knee. And then I'm just going to cuddle my knee into my chest. By doing this, I feel this on the outside of my glute, so I'll show you on the camera when I come to my opposite leg. I can then just extend that stretch just by pushing that knee more towards the opposite shoulder. So in this case, my right knee is going towards my left shoulder. Keep the squeeze here, so keep it into your chest, and push across. And then swap over, so my left leg or left foot is going up over my right knee, and I'm cuddling in, and I feel this in my glute just here. And then again, keep the squeeze into your chest, and I can push across. So now my left knee is going to my right shoulder. First time you do this movement, you don't have to hold it for too long and don't push it for too long. Then we're just going to swap and come back into this position 2 to 3 times. Each time you come back into the position, you should feel it's a little bit more comfortable and you'll be able to go a little bit further with your knee, both into your sternum and then also across to the opposite shoulder. And you will probably find one side is a little bit tighter than the other. You'll probably find everything that's tighter or weaker is going to be on the one side as well. So we have dominant sides. So for me, everything on my left is weaker and tighter. Yeah, once more into here. The next stretch we're going to do is going to start to get rotation. And this is a stretch that I have a lot in a lot of my videos. So I'm going to bring my right foot up and over, just catch my ankle on my opposite knee, and then bring my knee back towards my chest. So I'm just going into lateral rotation now with my hip. And I can feel that on the outside of the hip. And again, I'll show you on the other side towards the camera. So from there, I just want to stay in that position, just wiggle my knee up and down, feel that moving my hip. And then I'm going to swap over, so ankle up, over, catch it on your knee and bring it back in. And I can feel this, similar to where I felt the glute stretch before. Slightly different, a little bit more into hamstrings as well as we get that hip into rotation, just rotating our femur in its joint. And then we can just move the hips around. Same as before, so first time, don't hold it for too long, don't push it too far, and then when we repeat and go back into it, we can then start to push it further. To do that, we can just bring our foot closer to our glute or to our bum, just to get ourselves into more of a lateral rotation, a bit more hip flexion as well. And then swap back over. So again, just bring my glute closer to my foot to create more of a stretch. From here, I then want to go into hip 90-90s, so I'm just going to bring internal rotation here and external rotation with my left leg. So trying to get my foot straight out in front of me, sort of opposite to pigeon movement, which we'll come on to next. And then I just want to swap over, and I feel this up the outside of my leg here and into that TFL muscle. And then repeat 2 to 3 times. The more you get your body to roll round as well, so try and keep your chest facing straight out in front of you, because that gets more of a stretch into the hips. Okay, and then from here we're going to go into that pigeon movement. It's quite a common stretch this, so hopefully you've either done this one before or know what it is. So we're going to get our foot out in front of us, try and get it as square as we can. And then a nice long stretch back with our back leg, and then just drop down. If you need to start with, you can come up nice and tall with your body. The lower you can get with your body, the more of a stretch you're going to get into that hip. Everything we should do here should feel comfortable, so you shouldn't feel like you're fighting the movement or trying to resist it. So you should be able to relax into that position. Stretching or mobility shouldn't be painful. You should be able to breathe nice and relaxed as you do it. And then again, we're going to swap. So leg out in front of us. My left leg is going to go back now. And then just going to try and get nice and low with my body. If you do yoga or have done yoga, they use this stretch quite a lot. It's quite a nice one. If you've got SI joint pain, anything like that, it's quite nice for that. Okay, we're then going to come back into this position. We're going to focus a little bit more on the hip flexors and getting them to engage properly. So into this lunge position again, get a nice little stretch into those hip flexors. If you need to, get your body upright. You can slightly lean over away to the side that's down as well, just to increase that stretch. So just get a bit of movement into them before we come into the strengthen element. And then we're going to go into the seated position with our legs flat on the floor. I'm going to try and keep my body nice and upright, so I want to try and keep 90 degrees at my hips here. And then all I'm going to do, the more at 90 I am here, the more upright with my body, the harder this is. And then from there, all I'm going to do is keep my legs straight and just lift. And then swap and lift. It's quite a difficult movement at first, especially if you do have tight hip flexors. If you feel like you're going to cramp or you can't do that movement, just drop your body weight back a little bit and you'll find that that's easier to do. And then as you work through this, just try and creep your body up each time until you can get into that 90 degrees at your hip here. To progress that, you can then nice and slowly bring your leg up, hold, and then abduct, and then slowly back down on the eccentric movement. If you want, you can put a little target there just to lift your leg up and over. And again, repeat with the opposite side. And I don't want to just come up and then drop my leg down. I want to control it on that eccentric movement back down as well, and then up and over. 3 to 5 on each leg. To progress it, bring your body more upright or just go up higher with that leg. So increase the target you're trying to go over with. We can then take this into the lying position. And we're going to come into, so where we did the pelvic tilts before, we're going to do this from the lying position. So I can anteriorly rotate. So my neutral pelvis would be there. And then I just want to create the gap there so I can get my hand completely underneath. That's that excessive lordosis that I was talking about. And then I'm going to go posteriorly rotate with my hips. So if you just watch what my hips do as I just push my back into the floor there. To do that, I'm having to engage my glutes and my abs, which are the two ones that get weak with anterior pelvic tilt. So for there, I'm contracting my hip flexor, my hip flexors in here, my rectus spinae group, and then I'm contracting my abs and my glutes to do that movement. So work through both of those, and that in itself is a nice way to try and correct that anterior pelvic tilt. From here, I'm then going to try and find my neutral pelvis. So my back is on the floor and I'm going to try and keep it there. So as I drop my legs down, I don't want my back to come up like that. So I'm now in anterior pelvic tilt. So what I want to try and do is stay in that neutral pelvis. So back just touching the floor there for me. And then I want to try and keep my core, keep my abs tight, keep my glutes tight as I drop my legs down. You can see that that gap isn't appearing. So my back is still on the floor. And I'm going to bring them back up, still with my back on the floor, and then just drop them down again. It's a good way of trying to find control of that psoas muscle and everything around the pelvis. Keep doing that until you're nice and comfortable and don't feel like that's difficult. Once you're comfortable with that movement, you can do exactly the same thing, but you're going to bring your legs completely off the floor this time as you drop them down. And that makes it a little bit harder. But you can see my back is staying on the floor, so I'm not coming into that position. I'm keeping it nice and tight on the floor throughout the whole movement. I can then mess around with that and play around as much as I want and as much as I feel I need to. So you can hold your legs there, you can hold them out, bring them up, one a little bit higher, one higher there. You can bring one up towards your knee. And the whole time, my back is still on the floor here. I'm able to breathe, so I'm still talking to you. I can still breathe nice and easily whilst I'm doing that, so I'm not holding my breath like that, which you see a lot of people do. So it's nice and easy. My brain is really able to control those muscles. Keep working on that. Again, good form over trying to do it for long periods of time. So there's no point in you going into anterior pelvic tilt and going, oh, I can do this all day, because actually you're not helping the problem. So really make sure that back is down. If it helps, you can put your hand under your back, and you will be able to hold the squeeze onto your hands. So again, a nice little reminder for the brain. And that's a really, really good way of overcoming anterior pelvic tilt. The next thing that we're going to focus on is a little bit of lateral movement as well. This will be more in my video for lateral pelvic tilt, which I'll link at the end of this one. So have a quick go at these. So we're going to come into side plank, but with a slight difference. So what we're going to do is come up onto our knees and then just go into that side plank position. So nice and strong here. So we're not slooping down here with our hips. To feel this is working, if you just feel round onto your back, you'll feel that your erector spinae group or lower back, which is closer to the floor, is nice and firm and working hard, whereas the one higher up isn't working. So just feel round and check that that's the case. And then you can keep swapping over. For you, obviously, you could just roll over and then up into that position. And again, just check to make sure that the right side is working. So for me now, my lower side, my right erector spinae group is nice and firm. And then just into that position. And you can hold that, again, for as long as you feel like you can. Good quality over trying to do it for ages. The last one we're going to come into is effectively the Thomas test. So lying in that Thomas test position is quite nice for it as well, just help to stretch that hip flexor out. So flat on the floor, I'm just going to lie down. And then I'm going to bring one leg up and into my chest. Because I'm not on the edge of the couch, I don't feel my leg coming up here, but I am getting a nice stretch across the hip region. And then really slowly, I can just start to move that across and back out. So again, I get a little bit of rotation and abduction and adduction into my hip. And then swapping that over. Nice and relaxed as I do this, so breathing through out. If you get a little pinch in your groin, just reset and come back in. That's also a sign that you have a little bit of anterior pelvic tilt going on, or imbalances between your hips if you are getting a little pinch in your groin there. And you can keep swapping through these for as long as you can. And that is everything. So if you try and do that maybe 2-3 times a week. If you sit for a long period of time, so if you have a driving job or a desk job, I really would recommend doing this anyway. So even if you're not getting problems, you might have a bit of anterior pelvic tilt going on there, it's just not causing problems yet. So really do try and focus on doing this as well. It will help with your posture from day to day. It will help with your posture when you sit at your job as well. And if you are trying to do anything athletic, it will really help fire up all the muscles that need to work. If you're running, it will help fire up your glutes, stop any back pain or hamstring tendinopathy occurring then. So really, really good for good posture, good hip health, good back health. So a great routine to run through as often as you can within the week. Hope you enjoyed that. I hope it felt really good for you if you follow along at home. Any comments or questions, please do let us know. And thank you for watching.